Welcome, everybody. Hello, my name is Becca Choate, and I serve as Associate for Global Advocacy and Education with Global Ministries of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and the United Church of Christ. Welcome to Wednesdays with the World, a United Church of Christ webinar series. This series highlights the ways in which the quest for justice is intersectional and global, providing opportunities for increased awareness of global concerns and highlighting opportunities for advocacy and action. Today's webinar is called Witnesses with the World's Workers, and I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Reverend Sekinah Hamlin, the UCC's Minister for Economic Justice, who will introduce our speakers and moderate our discussion. Sekinah.
Thank you so much, Becca. We are so glad to be with you all today, and welcome to everyone who is on with us in real time, and all of those who will be on later on this evening and even next week. We thank God for the ministry of technology. Uh, as Becca stated, I am the Reverend Sekinah Hamlin, the Minister for Economic Justice for the United Church of Christ. We are so glad to be in partnership with you as we make this world a just place for all. And by world, we truly do mean world. We recognize that there is intersectionality in all things. And if this COVID-19 pandemic, global pandemic didn't teach us anything, certainly it taught us that we are all connected, no matter where we are on God's great earth. So I am so excited to have some powerful leaders with us today. It is not happenstance that this title is Witnesses with the World's Workers, because these people, these leaders that just so happen to all be women, are those actually that labor alongside workers and their families. We have to always remember that workers are themselves individuals, but more often they come from communities and they come from families. They come from a history, if you will. And what you'll hear today is how those histories, those communities, how things like climate change, how things like even elections in neighboring countries, or even how policies in one country as it relates to immigration and how workers need to migrate so that they are able to feed their families, what all that actually means so that we can better communicate, so that we can have better context for our work together, and so that we can dispel a lot of myths along the way. So I'm happy to have Shannon Ladera with us, who is the Director of Immigration Policy for the AFL-CIO. I'm also happy to have Julie Taylor with us, who is the Executive Director for the National Farmworker Ministry. And don't let that word national fool you, because she will tell you how national also is connected to the global. And I'm also very excited to have Lydia Mufasa with us, with us. And she is the first Vice General Secretary for the Zimbabwe Chamber of Informal Economy Associations. And I'm very excited to have Lydia with us because often we don't talk about the informal economy. And often we actually don't even talk about workers that may not be in unions. And so we have people who are leaders in all of those areas that will share stories of workers as well as their work alongside them, so that all may be visible in our time. And then after these outstanding leaders give their opening comments and statements, then we'll go into a time of question. I have some questions that I would lead off with, but we're going to invite all of you to make sure you also give us your questions. What's burning on your heart? What things have you seen in your communities as well? Shannon, I will give the floor to you first and welcome you and the AFL-CIO, one of our great partners together.
First of all, I just want to start by saying thank you so much for the opportunity to connect. It is exciting for me to know that there is such a thing as a Minister for Economic Justice, and to have the opportunity to work with you, Reverend Sekinah. And I think your commitment to this cause and even to this conversation while you're, having health concerns yourself is just a sign of the passion that you all bring to the work. So it's an honor to be with all of you. And so I just thought maybe as a starting point, I might just give a quick overview of who we are as the AFL-CIO and how we connect with workers globally, so that then we could sort of talk about in more practical ways about how we can all collaborate in the fight for justice and dignity moving forward. The federation, the AFL-CIO, is a federation of 57 unions in the United States that represent about 12.5 million workers. They are in all sectors of the economy. They are in all states in the country, and they come from every region of the world. So, we have unions that advocate for policies within certain industries that affiliate with the labor movement, and then we also have labor councils in every state and in most communities around the country that bring those unions together for local advocacy. Of course, really, it's our job, right, to ensure that everyone who gets up and goes to work every day in this country has family-sustaining wages, safe working conditions, equality, rights, and dignity. In a globalized economy, we know that we can't do that just by looking narrowly at what's happening here in the United States. We have to be connected to the big picture of how the world of work operates, and how, as you've said so eloquently, how interconnected we all are. The AFL-CIO is part of a global structure called the International Trade Union Confederation, which brings together the central labor bodies from 163 countries and territories worldwide, and represents formally, at least 200 million unionized workers. This is our space where we come together to try to ensure some balance of power in our economy, and to try to think through how we can together rewrite the rules to get a little bit more justice and to put people ahead of profit. Our global labor movement has structures within every major region. We have a structure in Africa, in the Asia Pacific, in the Americas, in the Pan-European region, and also an Arab Trade Union Confederation. And so that's how we seek to really try to align for a vision. We have a shared fate in this global economy. We need to have a shared agenda, and we need to have some good strategies to win. Maybe just to wrap up at least this initial part, I'll just say, a couple of the, sort of top priorities for our global labor movement right now. I think, as you mentioned, the pandemic has really exposed the need for sweeping changes to fix these economic and political systems that are failing working families and let too many people suffer and die. And so our global labor movement really has responded to that with a clarion call for what they are framing a new social contract. And this is about ensuring equality, inclusion, climate-friendly jobs, rights for all workers, and universal social protections. We've seen enough of people being excluded and left behind. So, of course, dear to my heart, immigration reform is a sort of essential part of the larger structural change that we need to create an economy that respects and protects working people, and also one that promotes democracy, right, in the workplace and in the community. And so unions, we advocate on the premise that we can build an immigration system that meets pressing human needs and also strengthens rights and standards for everyone, rather than increasing the vulnerabilities that workers already face in a corporate-driven global economy. And so the other, in addition to this push for a new social compact, the other key priority for the global labor movement right now is focused on this just transition agenda, right, in the face of acute climate change. And so really for us, a true just transition approach will use the process of social dialogue to plan for a future in which everyone has social protection, all jobs are decent, emissions are low, we eliminate poverty, and communities are thriving and resilient. And so that's a tall order, but that's the vision that we're all working towards. I know we share a lot of elements of that vision with the people on this call, and I'm looking forward to the conversation to talk more about any specific things that would be of interest.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And I wanted to see if Lydia, we were having some challenges earlier as we were testing things, but Lydia, are you able to come off mute?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, yes. I'm
We're having some challenges with I think with your connection, Lydia.
Now my network was so bad. Hello.
Lydia, I tell you what, Lydia, I'm gonna ask Julie to speak, and then maybe we can get those challenges with your connection worked out. As I said earlier, she is representing the informal economy associations in Zimbabwe. She's calling from Zimbabwe. So we're very thankful to have her on with us. And we will try to work those things out. And Julie, if you would, thank you. If you would come on and talk to us some about the National Farmworker Ministry, of which, of course, the United Church of Christ is a great partner with.
Yes, thank you, Sekinah. It's really lovely to be with everybody. And yes, the UCC is an important part of the National Farmworker Ministry and has been since the very beginning, believing with us, working with us, alongside us in solidarity with farm workers. So it's a joy to be here. Thanks for the invitation. National Farmworker Ministry is a faith-based organization that connects people of faith and conscience to farm worker-led campaigns of self-determination. Specifically, we are dedicated to educate, equip, and mobilize our constituency. That would be our denominational partners, religious orders, and regional groups that are part of the ministry. And we mobilize to support farm worker campaigns such as boycotts, legislation, public witness, consumer impact, and other kinds of things. Farm workers, 2 to 2.5 million in our country, are the primary workforce for the US food system. They are the ones who pick, sort, and pack most of our fruits and vegetables, which must be hand harvested. If you see produce in your grocery store, big box store, fruit stands, or produce markets, it was likely picked by the hands of a farm worker. The majority of these workers cross our border, some with documents and some without documents. Some come annually through the guest worker program called H2A. Some cross daily in border cities during the height of some harvest seasons, while others have been in our country for 10 years or more. Farm workers are settled in some areas. Many are rural, and others stay in one place for a good portion of the year, but migrate northward to follow crop harvesting from south to north and then back to south. Many are single young men, while others are families. Fully a third to a fourth of them are women. These workers are the lowest wage earners in our country. Because most of their work is in rural areas, they are hidden from sight. Most consumers have no concept of where their food comes from or what conditions farm workers endure to provide it for us. Farm labor in the US is viewed as menial and undignified. The low wages paid for it, as well as a lack of benefits, make it among the least sought after forms of employment in our country. The US farm labor grew out of indentured servitude, slavery, imported workers from Asia, and then from Mexico. In 1935, the National Labor Relations Act was passed in this country and provided support for union organizing in the US so workers would have freedom of association and the right to organize without retaliation. But that law specifically excluded farm workers and domestic workers, who at the time were primarily Black. During World War II, with a shortage of farm workers in this country, workers were recruited from Mexico in the Bracero program with promises of pay and good treatment. It was an abysmal program. If you happen to watch CBS Sunday Morning this last week, there was a gentleman who's 82 years old who talked about coming to this country and the conditions under which he did that and had to endure the process. After that program was abolished in the 60s, a temporary guest worker program called H2A was created to continue this supply of farm workers from the South. Unfortunately, this program today is still rife with challenges for farm workers, and it is in need of an overhaul. Consider one of the reasons that so many people are migrating to the US from Mexico, Central and South America. Keep in mind that the North American Free Trade Agreement was created in 1994. It meant all the countries could benefit from free goods that passed between our countries. But in fact, what happened is our country benefited because we dumped a lot of US products that were subsidized by the US agricultural system into the Mexican market. It put thousands of Mexican farmers out of work. And so many of those farmers then turned to do what they knew how to do, which was to do farming, and they came north to work in the fields of America. They lost their livelihoods and fled north to survive, and this reality continues today. And the reality of that makes farm workers extremely vulnerable to exploitation in our country. An ongoing lack of reasonable immigration reform has further exacerbated that situation. That's a bit of the context for farm workers in the US today. And so I'll stop there and then look forward to talking about some of the things that we try to do about that.
Thank you so much, Julie. Lydia hasn't been able to connect with us again, but we are anxiously awaiting her return. Let's start a little bit of the conversation, Julie and Shannon. I will point out something that I pointed out before, since we're all women on this call, and we know that the workforce, in terms of women in the workforce, that percentage continues to rise. And even, excuse me, as we look at the Zimbabwe chamber, of the informal economy, they actually have about 60% of their members are women. Can you talk some about women in the workplace? And I put workplace in quotes. What are some of the challenges that are facing women right now? And I'm really also asking in terms of some of the cultural things that are happening that continue to put up barriers for the equality, Shannon, that you talked about as it relates to just transition in our economy. What cultural things that continue to put up those barriers? What things you are seeing? What is the state of sex trafficking, even as we look at women who are seeking employment themselves and sometimes not able to find that? Whoever wants to start off.
I think, Shannon, I'll say a few things and you can say a few things and we'll roll back and forth a little bit. But for farm worker women, a lot of times the barriers that they're experiencing is that we have a system that's set up basically for male farm workers. So a lot of farm labor camps, they're not set up for families, and they're not set up for women. They're set up for huge groups of men to be in one place, and they don't accommodate sort of the specialities of women, privacy, the fact that women experience menstrual cycles and that sort of thing, the ongoing struggle of bathrooms in the field and access to that continue to be a difficulty for women. Although women are very creative in their approaches to that and how they try to overcome that. But at the same time, women who work at the early stages of their pregnancy and the needs that they have in an environment that is basically outdoor, it's labor, it's hard work, are challenges for them. The other challenge is ongoing sexual harassment and sexual violence. So being part of the minority of the workforce in the fields, having the fields be in rural places, sometimes the crops are such that within the rows, you're very vulnerable to what happens. But a lot of the pressure that's put on women, I know here in North Carolina, one of the cases that the Farm Labor Organizing Committee mitigated for a woman was just that her supervisor always wanted to put her in the car next to him, and it was just all of this pressure that she had to respond to him. And when she complained about it, of course, he threatened her job, and then he literally did fire her. And so then proving cause and all that kind of stuff became very difficult and a long process for her. So she was without work for over a year before the case was actually resolved in her favor. But then she has not been able to find another job. Nobody wants to hire somebody who took their employer to court. You know what I mean? So you have those sorts of difficulties. In the wider society, the lack of reporting is a difficulty anyway. In this environment, because farm workers often don't have documents, their fear of deportation, the rural nature of where they are, their English is not their first language. Even though they should be protected from retaliation, they're not. And even though at times when you approach them and even when the union is siding with them, there are ways that we can continue to see farm workers, this insidious retaliation that is much more difficult to monitor and to overcome. So it makes folks fearful of reporting that and securing their own rights that they deserve. So women in the workforce, when you're talking about it, those are some of the specific challenges to them: wage theft, not getting the same hours, not getting the same opportunities as men get, because there's an assumption that they can't work as hard. Though we talk to lots of women that work incredibly hard. So, you know, it's a poor excuse, but those are some of the things that come to mind at first. And Shannon probably wants to share a little bit more or add to that.
Shannon, before you add, let me just, Julie just gave me a jumping off place,
Oh.
and just to kind of highlight some more even about the National Farmworker Ministry and the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, because we also know that the Fair Food Campaign, which they started, it is documented that the Fair Food Campaign and the ways in which it makes sure that women are safe actually reduces the number, excuse me, of the percentage of sexual violence. And so we're really thankful for that. And we continue to boycott Wendy's because it continues to be the only major fast food company that has not signed on to the Fair Food Program. And I often wonder, you know, it is such a slap in the face for it to even be named Wendy's, and for us to know that one of the things that the Fair Food Program does is to make sure that women are safe, and for them to continue to say no to that. And then I just wanted to highlight, and I know Shannon, you, after I say this, then I'm anxious to hear what you have to say as well. But just to highlight again that the World Council of Churches, of which the United Church of Christ is a part, every Thursday, we have Thursdays in Black, where we together band with people of faith all over this country, Christians all over this country, to work for a world where there is not gender-based violence, no more violence, period, actually. And violence, as Julie talked about, is in the fields, absolutely. Absolutely. So Shannon, thank you so much for allowing me just to, oh, Julie is going to say something and follow up.
Yeah, just sort of to finish, to build a little bit on what you say, there are food certification programs like the Fair Food Program, the Milk with Dignity program. We talk about a lot of these on our website, but also just union membership. There is more support for addressing sexual harassment if you're part of a union, because you have that agreement that stands with you, and you have that group of farm workers who or farm worker organizing groups that stand with you. All of those programs are some of the best ways we have of protecting people, of ensuring their rights. The sad thing about that is, of all the farm workers in the US, if you took all of the farm workers participating in the Fair Food Program and these food certification programs in the unions and in the associations and coalitions where there's support, you're still only covering about 1% of the total farm workers in this country. So we're glad for that. We celebrate that. We highlight that. We work on that, but we work for broader legislation to cover all farm workers. And I'm sure Shannon could say that about unions in this country, the number of workers that are covered by unions versus the ones that aren't. But anyway, I just wanted to add that, because you're right, that program is a great program. It's something that farms sign into, and then there's certain things they have to do. They have to prevent this. They have to follow through with those grievances, and they have to do it without retaliation. And that's the only place that might happen in some cases.
Well, so I can jump in with a few other thoughts on this. First of all, we should celebrate some good things, because we could all use good news, right? So we just came away from our convention last month, where we elected the first ever female president of the AFL-CIO. I was on watching a hearing this morning on the guest worker programs, for the agriculture and non-agriculture seasonal work, and I heard the female president of the United Farm Workers share her analysis of the changes that are needed. The president of the general secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation is a fierce, Australian woman. I have my sister, the Vice Secretary General from Zimbabwe on the college. So I think we have to celebrate that we have really seen the ascendance of women in leadership roles, and I think lots of positive changes will come with that energy that they bring. I think we also have to look at, in the wake of the COVID economy, we've heard a lot about the Great Resignation, right? And I think what we saw coming out of the incredibly disproportionate impact of the pandemic on on low-wage communities, on women, and on particularly on women of color, right, is that we saw a different kind of collective action, right, and that was like deciding to withdraw from the labor movement, and as a result of that, there is so much more dynamism now in our economy around lifting the floor, right? I think the collective action of people around the country, in a de facto way, it set a new minimum wage, right? And we know who led that, right? People who said, no, that is not enough to risk my life, right? That is not enough to risk my family. And, I don't have the supports that I need. And so I do think that it radically changed the conversation to see that departure of women from the labor movement, right? And it is, and that is its own form of power that I think we have to celebrate and build on, and we have to use this time to capitalize. And I'll just connect to my own personal journey into the migration policy work. And I think like many people, I got sucked into this through a group of workers, right? And they were women from the Philippines. I was working at the teachers union. They had been recruited to teach in public schools in Louisiana. They have been trafficked. They were the first class of workers certified under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Was a group of 350 Filipino teachers, most of them with master's degrees, who were brought here and just faced egregious abuse at the hands of the recruiter. They were almost all women. And in addition to so many other things that they endured, they were separated from their kids. They were told that they couldn't bring their families with them. They were trying to go to birthday parties over Skype, right? And they were forced to leave their own families behind in order to help educate and raise ours. And that is part of the dynamic that a lot of the feminized parts of migration flows really creates, right? Because we hear a lot and we talk about the care economy, right? But the fact is that a lot of feminized migration trends are responsive to that. And as women go into the workforce, then oftentimes it's migrants who come in to take up the care roles in the home. And so there's a whole connection here, right? To our failure to create real systems of supports for women workers, like public child care systems, early care, elder care, that the migration policies have sort of had to respond to in ways that really have failed so far to generate adequate kind of changes in wages and working conditions. So we have to see the intersection, I think, of all these fights, and to really understand that to the extent that we are bringing people to our country to serve vital roles, that their families have to be respected as well, and that it's our work to ensure dignity and justice and rights and fair pay as those trends continue.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I'm so glad that you stressed the empowerment part of it. It's interesting. My brother, he said, he often, instead of saying the great resignation, he says the great renegotiation. which I actually really like, because it is about empowerment. It is about workers recognizing that they have the power to set some different terms. And so I'm very thankful for that, and thankful for you raising that up. I'm curious to know, tell me where you see countries getting it right. Where do you see countries getting it right? You talked about in terms of care, the care economy. We all know that that's wrapped up also in healthcare as well. Where do you see countries getting it right and striking that balance between the dignity of a person, of a human being that happens to also work for a living, but the person who is connected to a family and a community and has other roles that they are honored to live out. So where are the places where they're getting it right?
Well, I have to say that's the tough question, right? But, I mean, because we have so few heartening examples, and I want to just acknowledge something at the beginning of this. So, like, at the time when I started working with nurses and teachers, 70% of countries report a nurse shortage. Right. And so when you start looking globally at our conversations around, social development goals and all those sorts of things like that. And if we set up a scenario where the wealthy countries are the ones, right, who are going to get the nurses, right? I mean, these, these dynamics really have to be examined in such a fundamental way, I think. And to me, that just smacks of a neo-colonial form of resource exploitation. That's us subsidizing our health and our education systems on the backs of developing economies who invested in training a workforce, which we then hire away without any return, right, on that investment. And that is structural to those countries who are losing, sort of essential, service providers, right? And so I think that there are very profound questions that have to be analyzed in the context of this, and we need to figure out how we commit globally to training enough people to sort of feed and care for and educate everyone, right? And to have less of a sense of extraction in the way that we pursue our particular labor migration policy. So, I mean, I work closely with a lot of the global unions who sort of negotiate these deals. There's one example that we look to where because it was done through the auspices of the International Labor Organization, where there's a requirement for unions to be at the table with governments and employers as things get negotiated. There was a better model set up for nurses who are going into Germany to be able to come with union membership, with rights with their family, and with the right for permanence, right? And I think that that when we look at labor migration in the context of whether it's the H-2A program here, I mean, that is the dominant model everywhere in the world. And one of the things that we have to acknowledge about those basically what you would say is disposable on-demand captive labor programs is that they also fundamentally disenfranchise the working class, right? Those are people who have no political rights. And we know that the levels of the percentage of the workforce in many parts of the world is quite high that's in that temporary labor migration status, and that is a recipe for structural inequality, right? Those are tiered rights for workers, which we just can never accept as a labor movement. That is something that we have to fundamentally object to, the idea that we would have differentiated rights models for workers based on where they're from or what type of visa category they're in or things like that. And so I wish I had more positive models to point to, but I can say that the other thing that I find heartening is sometimes it's the workers who have the most to lose, who are doing the most innovative strategies to try to challenge the dominant economic models. And I am so saddened that we haven't heard more from our sister in Zimbabwe, but that's what I take from what I know of the story of the fight that they're taking in the informal economy there. That's what we see in terms of the leadership from undocumented workers who are standing up to be unafraid and making and leading campaigns. And so I think a lot of it is really about tapping into that that vision and that power, and seeing how we can work to get the policies out of the way so that real change can come from the ground up.
Thank you so much. Julie, do you have anything to add? Where are you seeing policy that is an inspiration, or where you see some places where people are working to get it right? And I know in terms of you talked about the milk with dignity and the fair food, but where else are you seeing things? And right, but actually, I just see Lydia has come back on. Lydia, are you able to have a good connection now? Okay, she and I have been emailing, so we're trying to see if perhaps she could record a video that we could play before we get off the line as well. So, okay, Julie.
Yeah, I think a strategy that a lot of the farm worker organizers have employed, farm workers themselves, have been these consumer campaigns to get sort of the wider society to pay attention and capture their imagination to support. Outside that, I think, we keep trying to work on legislation. I mean, I would love to go back and change the National Labor Relations Act, from 1935. That's not been possible so far. And so, the workaround has been these consumer campaigns or the union efforts and that sort of thing, with other things like, for example, farm workers and domestic workers were left out of legislation around so that they would be guaranteed overtime. I mean, most folks in this country don't know that farm workers are not eligible for overtime. Most of the time they work 6, sometimes 7 days a week, and they can work up to 14, 16 hours a day. I mean, it's an incredible schedule. But they make the same amount the first hour they work that they make in the 15th hour that they work. And so I have to say that pockets of encouragement are in places like California, that's enacted state legislation around that. New York State passed a law, although I just say that in the rollout, there have been numerous pushbacks for them, and yet it's there, and there are people that are working on it, trying to make that work. And we're grateful for that. And so what we're seeing is in lieu of federal legislation that should cover everybody, that there's these ongoing efforts. In Virginia, there's a group there, the Virginia Interfaith Public Policy Office, Kim Bobo is in that office, and they continue to push legislation like this in the state, and even get it to a point where sometimes it's waiting for the governor's signature. It hasn't passed yet, but I give them a lot of credit because they keep bringing it back. I mean, there's like this hope for that. In Massachusetts, they've been working on statewide $15 an hour for everybody, but also expanding that to include farm workers with overtime. Not yet one, but they keep putting it forward. And so we're encouraged by that. The other place that we've been desperate to see, with climate change, higher temperatures, farm workers are so subject to heat stress. Other workers in this country are as well, but farm workers extremely so. And So the only state in the country right now that has legislation around that. We've been working on federal regulations, trying to get OSHA to draw some up. So I will say that OSHA in the last year did a proposal around heat stress regulations for the country, and Farmworker Partners, there was a number of groups that made comments towards that, but it's still in process. In the meantime, there are states. Last year, if you remember, during part of their season, Washington and Oregon were in these, I mean, their temperatures were just unbelievable at different points. So there was emergency legislation that was enacted in the states. And so what's been happening, this year is in both the states, they've been going back to say, you know what, that shouldn't just be emergency because it happened last year. This is something that we should make year round, every year, put it on the books. And so there's efforts in those states to do that kind of thing. And we want to, I want to see that in Florida, because Florida is a state that has really tremendous rates of heat stress, plus add the humidity that they deal with. But pockets of work that are going on in different places that we try to keep up and add our voice to. There's a very comprehensive bill that I think was presented in the last Congress, and they want to promote in this Congress, but it's so comprehensive around pesticide exposure. I mean, it's amazing how many companies in this country they're chemical companies, and they make pesticides. And so they don't want you to regulate those. They don't want you to ban anything. And in some cases, growers have gotten so used to utilizing certain chemicals in an effective way, they don't want to see any of those chemicals banned, because then they have to relearn their systems and all that kind of stuff. But there continue to be, we're actually working with Alianza Nacional de Campesinos out in California with extensions around the country, and Earth Justice on a bill to ban organophosphates that we hope is introduced tomorrow. And then we can work on during the sort of the legislative recess, get people in these in their home districts to go visit their legislator and say, look, this has been introduced, be a co-sponsor. It continues to be a struggle though, because big business in a lot of ways is pushing back against that. I mean, when Shannon mentioned the testimony she was watching yesterday around the H-2A regulations, that was set up years ago to accommodate, the seasonal, you have 3 months of strawberries in some place or whatever, this seasonal amount come in for this amount of time. And over the years, it's been expanded to include more than one product, or more than one product, so that now it might be 6 to 9 months that people are away from their families and here to do that and then go back. And part of the proposals, part of the negotiations, big part that the American Farm Bureau is pushing is to make the temporary guest worker program year round, so it can provide workers for the dairy industry, the poultry industry. These are jobs that are year round. Why don't you give citizenship for them? What's the point of having a temporary worker for a year and a half, 2 years? That's not a temporary worker. And so, but I don't know why that seems so reasonable to people. It's because they're desperate to get workers to do it. So I say, set up citizenship, reasonable pay, protections for people, and provide those as jobs. Invite people to bring their families here and live in your community. But they've been abusing that program. So some of these proposals are, we want to see an overhaul, a change. Some of our farm worker partners don't want to see a temporary guest worker program at all. So those are some of the debates, but we take hope in these little increments of things that folks are working on and that they take up, and some of the battles that get won that way. So
thank you so much, Julie. Lydia, I think we have you on now. Can you unmute? Lydia?
Thank you for taking me out. It's unfortunate I didn't hear the other presentation. Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Can you hear
can.
me?
Yes, we can. Thank
Hello?
you. Ah. Oh, goodness. Oh,
Sekinah, can I just say that access to technology,
excess. Yes, I was. Yes.
yeah, we struggle with this with farm workers in rural areas because so many things are electronic, and in the pandemic, their access, and yet they had none. And Lydia is an example of the struggles that is in a lot of places. So many of us take that for granted, but access to that, yeah.
Well, and not only just farm workers and not only rural areas. That was a great struggle even with school systems, with getting kids to learn or having access. So Lydia, you're back. We did hear you. So can you come off mute? Lydia.
Yes, yes, I did hear
Yes.
other people's presentations, but I'm going to come mine now. I'm the first Vice Secretary General of Zimbabwe Informal Economy Associations, which is an association which was the program, which people lost informed because of their, and they decided, some went into the streets to sell different wares, and some decided to do backyard industry, like those who were employed in the industry. If in the tailoring sector, people would go to their homes and do theirs. They also they were doing now homes.
Lydia, you're breaking up, but I tell you what, and I think you may have received my email about this. We would love if you could just record a video and then send it to me via email, and we could send it out or post it in the materials. Becca, thank you so much, because we do want to hear the witness from Zimbabwe. But I'm also reminded of the Zacchaeus Tax Justice Project, which is about reparatory justice. And we are with that project in the World Council of Churches and the World Communion of Reformed Churches, particularly because in the Global South, there are a lot of things that are not sustainable. And as we look at ways in which people are able to be leaders in this global economy, access to the digital spaces is paramount. And that continues to be something that we need to work on in all of our countries, as well as the rural. So thank you so much. And thank you, Becca, for putting that in the chat, and we'll send that around as well. Final words from any of our leaders on the phone. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I just want to thank you again. And I mean, there's something that our former president used to say that I think might be a useful way to close. I mean, he talked about the choice that we have right now to choose between a worldview of scarcity or one of abundance. And that those who embrace a vision of scarcity feel compelled to build walls, to turn away refugees, to exclude the sick, the poor, the marginalized. And he really used to warn against the appeal of austerity, right? Because it's strong and it's self-reinforcing and it can dress in the clothing of responsibility. But really the way that we counter the fear of scarcity is to demonstrate the power of an abundant approach. The success that comes from opening our doors, investing in jobs, educating our children, loving our neighbors, embracing immigrants, and taking care of each other. And so I think that kind of aligns, so much of the agenda here and the fight that we're in right now, that's really just about how we view the world and trying to build that shared sense that we will all rise or fall together.
I agree with Shannon. That's perfect for us, perfect for people of faith. I think one of the things that has been helping us, because National Farmworker Ministry and you are all focused on systemic change, on advocacy. It's a challenge. It takes longer. It's harder. It takes a lot more strategy than just meeting an immediate need, even though immediate needs are also important. And so we had a meeting in Bakersfield, California earlier this year, and just before her 93rd birthday, I think, Dolores Huerta came to speak to us, one of the founders of the United Farm Workers. And so I asked her during the evening, because we were having this informal chat, and she was talking about history and all these things that were going on in the world and that sort of thing. And just said to her, after all this time, there's discouragements and whatever, what keeps you going? And Dolores said, she just looked at me like, don't you know? And then what she said was, there's work to do. It was just as simple as that. There's work to do. We want to do it because we care about people and it matters. For us, farm workers feed us. They don't need our help. They need us to stand with them. They have their own voices. They don't need us to speak for them. And so that's the work that we do. That's the work that the United Church of Christ does. And we're grateful for it. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and be part of this conversation today. Yeah.
Lydia, you want to try to give us just a quick closing statement?
Okay, let me try. Can you hear me now? Is it better now? Is it better now? Am I audible?
Better. It's better now. Yes, now it is.
Oh, okay. So I was saying, then the informal people decided to form an association, which is the Zimbabwe Chamber of Informal Economy Associations, which has a mission statement, has a vision, it has principles and values. Maybe in short, if I could just share the principles and values, that is gender sensitivity, women empowerment, youth empowerment, respect, continuity, inclusive growth and development, loyalty to membership, non-discrimination, and unity of the majorities in the informal sector, with with 338,000 members and 11,000 paying a fee of US $6 per year. And due to the COVID pandemic, a lot of people, their money for the businesses, and now they don't have the capitalized. But as an association, we are trying to strive maybe to revive, but as of now, we don't have much funds, and still the COVID pandemic is still ongoing, and the effects are still very, very big. So the levels of the membership activities are no longer as functional as they were, because it hasn't been easy for people to meet. It hasn't been easy for people to go about doing their businesses. But as an association, we're still pushing for the government to recognize the informal workers, because they're the ones who are in the majority. They are more than the formal workers. So we're pushing and negotiating to want to be mainstreamed, the informal workers to be recognized, so that people can get social protection. Because as of now, informal workers, they don't have funeral covers and things like that. So that's what we're pushing for, so that all the informal workers.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you. Your connection is leaving us now. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone, Lydia, Shannon, Julie, thank you all. To Brandy and Becca, who have been behind the scenes, thank you as well.
And maybe improve their levels. We also have a big number of people living with disabilities. They are the ones maybe you find in the streets selling
Thank you all again. And we will try. Lydia, we can't hear you. We're gonna try to do it another way, Lydia, because what you're saying is so very important, and particularly as the last thing we heard was you talking about informal workers with disabilities as well, and this actually is the Disability Month in the United States, and so we often we don't talk about that. And so we recognize, and I recognize in particular, that we need to do more with this subject and do more, particularly with the subject of the informal economy, which is a result, quite honestly, of often the extractive economy that you talked about, Shannon, and capitalism, as well as colonialism. It's all wrapped up together. So racism is never far behind. So at any rate, we thank you all again. I will close with a very short prayer. I will mention to everyone that we will put in the follow-up material that we are partnering with the AFL-CIO to make sure we have labor in the pulpit. Julie talked some about Virginia as well. Virginia is one of our target states for labor in the pulpit, but we want to recognize and offer to all of our churches a time to hear from one of our labor unions and or someone that is in partnership with the AFL-CIO. They're also in partnership with other worker associations of non-unionized workers as well. But we want, particularly on Labor Day in the US, to be able to talk about their experiences. And so that means just simply like 3 to 5 minute, some churches call it a minute for mission, or 3 to 5 minute segment, be it in the worship service, in Sunday school, or what have you, where we can engage the labor movement. And making sure that you realize that we still have open our action alert for the PRO Act as well. And we are still standing with the workers of the United Mine Workers of America in their fight for benefits at Warrior Met, which is the longest strike in Alabama history. So let us pray briefly. God, we say thank you for the leadership of these women. We say thank you for their ministries. And we say thank you that we are able to work together to create a just world for all. And as we work together, we do it from a platform and a theology in which we recognize that there is abundance. But we also work so that we can make sure that within that theology, everyone has the sufficiency, what they need to survive and to provide for their families, to make sure that they have healthy drinking water and health care. And so, God, as we work together on this, we say thank you for how you continue to weave us into even a larger blanket so that we can show true that we are stronger together. In the name of the great warrior, we pray. Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if this conversation has moved you, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or your soul, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed as you continue your day. Know that you are not alone, and we are holding you in prayer. Amen.